Did not get to meet him, but again, directly was impacted by him. But no, unfortunately, I was not.
Hello, Marianne de Visser in the room. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Hi, Marianne.
Hello.
Hi, Marianne. How are
Hi.
you?
Fine, how are you?
Good afternoon, Marianne.
Hello, Sarosh. Hello, Marco.
Hello. Hello, Perry.
Pierre-Marie. Bonjour, Pierre-Marie.
(6:30) sharp. Shall we start, Chandrasekhar?
Yeah, we will wait for about 2-3 minutes.
Okay.
With the light on, it is better, sir. Yeah, this is better.
But the light gets into my eyes. That's the bad part.
Yeah.
I can do something else. I'll switch off one of the lights. That's better.
Should we start now, sir? Dr. Meshram?
Yeah, we can start.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, my seniors, colleagues, I think a lot of hard work goes into organization of meetings. And I have had the good fortune of seeing Dr. Meshram put in a huge amount of hard work that goes into organization of these meetings, planning these meetings. So I think just hats off to him. He's been doing it in one forum or the other for the last many years. I think it all began with the COVID. And am I right, Dr. Meshram, sir? Just about the COVID time. And the current series is, of course, inspiring people. And we've had a wonderful journey learning about so many neurologists whom many of us just had read about or read their chapters, books, and seminal articles. And today also is exactly something like that. It's all about Professor Ted Mansett, who was, I can say, I mean, all I can say about him is when I was a resident, I would hear my teachers talk about him a lot and talk about his papers a lot. So I think his contribution to neurology must have been tremendous, which is why he was such a talked about person. And of course, to introduce the speakers for today, the chairpersons and the speakers for today who are no less eminent, and also all the other participants on the panel. We have Dr. Meshram, the man who is moving the mountains. That means he's moving and and is responsible for this whole show. So Dr. Meshram, over to you to introduce the theme behind today's meeting, number one, and the chairperson, and then the speaker, which would, of course, be introduced subsequently. Dr. Meshram, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Gagandeep. Dear friends, buenos dias, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, bonjour. Tropical and Geographical Neurology Specialty Group of World Federation of Neurology and Indian Academy of Neurology have come together to organize this very important series, Inspiring People in Neurosciences. And in this series, we have learned and will be learning about the legends who have done great work in the field of neurosciences. The idea is to stimulate the younger and not so younger generation to do outstanding work in the field of their choice. And today we are into the 8th session, and I welcome you all for this session. Now, inspirational person today is Professor Theodore Munsart, known as Ted Munsart. And being the founder director of Continuum Program, his contribution to neurology education is immense. He served the WFN for a long time, and he was the foundation chair of what later became the WFN Education Committee. To talk about this inspirational person today, we have our own Secretary General of Tropical and Geographical Neurology Specialty Group of WFN, Professor Marco Tulio Medina. Warm welcome to you, Marco. To chair this session, we have Professor Stephen Lewis, who carries on the legacy of Professor Ted Munsart as chair of WFN Education Committee and editor-in-chief of Continuum, the Lifelong Learning in Neurology, the official CME journal of American Academy of Neurology. Professor Steve is currently chair and chief of neurology at the Lehigh Valley Health Network in Pennsylvania. And prior to that, until 2017, he was professor of neurological sciences and associate chair at the Rush University Medical Center in Chicago. Steve graduated from Yale University with the degree in molecular biophysics and biochemistry and received his MD at Stanford University School of Medicine and did his neurology residency at University of Chicago. He is author of books, Field Guide of the Neurological Examination and Neurological Disorders Due to Systemic Diseases. He is elected trustee of WFN for the second term and is chair of WFN Education Committee, editor of World Neurology, and chair of Teaching Course Committee for the World Congress of Neurology in Dubai 2019 and Rome 2021. In 2019, Dr. Lewis received the A.B. Baker Award for Lifetime Achievement in Neurology Education from the American Academy of Neurology. And this is a very prestigious award. And one more thing, that he's actively participated in almost all sessions of neuroinfection and the Inspiring People in Neurosciences series. Welcome, Professor Steve. I would also like to welcome the invited panelists for today's session, Professor Alak Gupta, who will soon join, who is a trustee of WFN and director of Moscow Research and Clinical Center for Neuropsychiatry, Professor Marianne Visser, who is also WFN trustee and emeritus professor of neuromuscular diseases at the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Professor Gretchen Birbeck. She is professor of neurology at the University of Rochester. Professor Sarosh Katrak, emeritus professor at JJ Group of Hospital and Jaslok Hospital, Mumbai, India. Professor Axel Siva, Professor of Neurology at the Department of Neurology of Istanbul University, and where he was a past chairman, and he continues to head the clinical neuroimmunology unit and multiple sclerosis clinic. And we also have in the room the distinguished personalities. Professor Yuji Kazi is the first vice president of WFN. I am President Professor J.M.K. Murthy. My friend Dr. Gagandeep Singh, who is the past secretary of Indian Academy of Neurology. Professor Tisa Vijayaratne, who is chair of World Brain Day and Public Education Committee of WFN. So we are going to have a great session with all the interesting faculties, and I would like to welcome you all for this session. And this series is going on extremely well, and there is so much of every session is so inspiring and so educative and so absorbing that it's a great feeling to organize these sessions. And I am very sure that you will enjoy these sessions, because we have stalwarts who will be talking about the stalwart, and there will be heart-to-heart talk, brain-to-brain talk, and mind-to-mind talk. Before I hand over to Professor Steve, I would like to remind you that in October, we will not have the session due to the World Congress. However, the next session is on 6th November, and Professor Perry-Marie Fuchs, who is also here for this session. I welcome Professor Perry-Marie, and Professor Amadou Gallo-Diop will talk about Professor Michel Dumas, and Professor Michel Dumas will also talk in that session. So it is a 6th November, block your date. And now I hand over to Professor Steve Lewis, and I once again welcome you all for this session. And Amadou Gallo-Diop has also joined. Welcome, Gallo. So,
hi, everybody.
We have the,
Okay.
actually, Professor Will Carroll has sent the message, and Professor Griswold, they will be joining intermittently. They are involved in the headache symposium with African Academy. Thank you very much. Professor Steve, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meshram. It is absolutely my pleasure and honor to be chairing this session about Dr. Ted Munset. Now, I did not have the pleasure of meeting Dr. Munset personally, but as you know, and he had a direct, as you know, Chandrasekhar, he had a direct and profound impact on my own career. And I look forward to hearing so much more about Dr. Munset from those who did have the privilege and honor of working with him. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Medina, Marco Tullio Medina, who will be speaking about Dr. Munset. Dr. Medina is Professor of Neurology and Epilepsy, former Dean of the Faculty of Medical Sciences of the National Autonomous University of Honduras. Professor Medina is Director of the WHO Collaborating Center for Research and Community Intervention in Epilepsy. He's the WFN Regional Director for Latin America and President of the Pan American Federation of Neurological Societies. Professor Medina is Secretary General of the Tropical and Geographical Neurology Specialty Group of the WFN, and in 1992 established a genetic research consortium called GENES. Professor Medina is founding president of the International League Against Epilepsy chapter in Honduras and the ILAE Latin America Academy of Epilepsy. His areas of interest include neurology, tropical neurology and public health, adult and pediatric epileptology, clinical neurophysiology, and genetics. And his honors include Epilepsy Ambassador of the ILAE and IBE, and the Chevalier de la Légion d'Honneur of France. Marco, thank you so much for speaking to us today about Ted Munset, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. I will share my screen. It is a great honor to talk about my mentor, Professor Theodore Monsat, TED, on behalf of the Tropical and Geographical Neurology Specialty Group of World Federation of Neurology, chaired by my dear friend, Professor Chandrasekhar Mishran, and in collaboration with the Indian Academy of Neurology, I will try to express my opinion, my feelings of my mentor. And I know that around the world, Professor Monsat has had a lot of students and friends that he inspired. The World Federation of Neurology lost an outstanding leader on November 22, 2013, with the death of Professor Theodore Leon Monsat, TED, in Waltham, Massachusetts, the United States of America, at the age of 83. Professor Monsat was born in Portland, Maine, in 1930 to Leo and Ethel Monsat. As you can see, this is a beautiful place in the United States, close to the sea. And Professor Monsat loved it a lot, the sea. Then he moved to Rutland, Vermont, when he was a child. As you can see, this is a beautiful place where TED was considering his home for the rest of his life. A beautiful place with mountains and trees in the east part of the United States. He graduated from the Rutland High School in 1948, and he was Tiger TED. He was the co-captain of the all-state football team in that year. And you can see here his Rutland High School picture. He was quite enthusiastic, and I think he was, he loved a lot of sports during his life. He received his BA degree in chemistry at the University of Michigan, and he was passionate about Michigan football. In 1957, he received his medical doctor degree from the University of Vermont. And then he completed an internship at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, followed by a neurology residency with Professor Houston Murray at the New York Neurological Institute, Columbia Presbyterian Medical Center. Professor Monsat used to tell me that Professor Houston Murray was a great educator, very tough educator at the New York Neurological Institute. He was a fellow of one of my professors, Professor Monsat, at that time, Professor Francisco Rubio Donadieu from Mexico. Professor Monsat completed his training with Augustus Rose at the University of California in Los Angeles. And after serving in the Navy for 2 years, he returned to UCLA in 1963 as an assistant professor of neurology and director of the muscular dystrophy clinic, where he worked with Professor Carl Pearson. He enjoyed living in Los Angeles. I was living as well in Los Angeles, and he was telling me that, you know, he was having a beautiful home. And then he was moving to Boston, and he told me that he was selling his home for an amount of money that after several years after, he thought that was so cheap that he said that, you know, UCLA became you know, all the homes the price was very high. So he was thinking to have a home in Los Angeles because he enjoyed Los Angeles a lot. And then he was moving to the University of Southern California in 1970. He moved to the University of Southern California, first as an associated professor, and then in 1973 as professor of neurology. He went to the UK in 1975, and he took a 12-month sabbatical in Newcastle upon Tyne with Professor Lord Walton, where he was trained in neuromuscular. He enjoyed living there. We were just discussing about his time in London, and for him, the tough thing was driving because, you know, the side of the driving is different in the UK compared to the United States. So he had some problems at that time, but he really enjoyed living in the UK. In 1976, he became chairman of neurology at Tufts University and at the New England Medical Center. Professor Monsad was after emeritus professor of neurology. He really enjoyed living in working in Tufts University. He enjoyed developing his career in that university. And Professor Monsad received many honors during his long career, including the A.B. Baker Award for Education of the American Academy of Neurology, the Sheila Essay Award for ALS Research, and the degree of Doctor of Medicine honoris causa by the University of Marseille. I was also living in Marseille, and I met his friend, Professor Georges Serratrice. He enjoyed going to Marseille, and he was telling me that he enjoyed seeing the Mediterranean Sea. As you can see there, this is the University of Aix-Marseille and the Mediterranean Sea and les îles de Ratonneau that you can see there in Marseille. He enjoyed being there, working with Professor Serratrice. Professor Monsad became president of the American Academy of Neurology, and he was really enthusiastic working at that time because he, at that moment, he started a project that he was believing a very important project for the community, for the neurology community, not just in the US, but also around the world. He was launching that new program in 1993, and he was thinking about the work continuum as a lifelong learning experience in neurology. Professor Monsad made a great impact with this tool, and with the support of the WFN, he started working on different capacities as a trustee, as chairman of WFN Education and Research Committee, and chairman of the WFN ALS Research Group. But at the World Federation of Neurology, he started seminars in clinical neurology. You can see here some of those documents, and he was thinking that those seminars can be like a similar instrument for developing countries, because he was thinking that maybe a continuum was so sophisticated for some developing countries, and the reality and the experiences of neurology around the world, as we know, is different in different parts because of the epidemiology, because of the subjects of and other issues. And he was thinking that the WFN seminars in clinical neurology could be a good tool for people around the world. Professor Monsat started a CNE program in 42 countries. That program was using the journal that he founded, Continuum, that was donated by the American Academy of Neurology, and more than 42 developing countries participated in this program. I was part of his education committee, and in 2007, we were having a discussion about this important tool, bringing the American Academy of Neurology and the WFN to a continuum online worldwide. He was thinking that that tool can be used also the online system. The same thing that we are living actually with the pandemic. He was thinking that we can be connected all around the world. Stephen, almost 9 years later, was discussing about that collaboration. And he was showing the countries that were using Continuum. And I truly believe that that tool has been so important around the world for keeping that experience that Monsat was expressing in 1994. Professor Monsat was supporting the neurologic training program around the world. And he was assisting several programs, for instance, in Ethiopia, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Peru, and so on. I will try to summarize some of my own experience when I was working with Professor Monsat, when we started a joint project of developing a neurology training program in Honduras, a joint project of neurologists in Honduras and the World Federation of Neurology. We published that paper several years ago, and Professor Monsat was visiting us 23 years ago with Professor Alberto Portera Sanchez from Spain. He was evaluating all the details. He was going back and forth to the university hospital, to the Ministry of Health, to everybody that can support our idea. And his conclusion at that time, that was his recommendation that a training program in neurology should be established at the Hospital Escuela in Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And he was believing that there was a pressing need for more neurologists to address the unmet health needs for the people of Honduras. Professor Monsat started a journey with us for 10 years, going back and forth, and having several professors that came from different parts of the world. For instance, Professor Charlotte Dravet from Marseille, France, Professor Antonio Delgado Escueta from UCLA, and other professors and residents that you can see here. Those mentors were coming and evaluating the residents, and Professor Monsat also, he was annually evaluating the residents. And the first evaluation was done, and Professor Monsat evaluated Temis Enamorado with a ALS case. That was a very tough test for a resident. Having Ted Monsat evaluating a resident with a case of ALS. But actually, he was very gentle with the resident. He was the second-year resident at that time. Professor Monsat was helping us, and he was giving us the opportunity to have a network. For instance, here, Professor Monsat is is inaugurating a EEG lab that was donated by our friends from Holland. Marianne de Visser was instrumental for that. And I think that connection was so important because, the residents started working with the EEG and EMG equipment. Here is the first generation of neurologists. After 10 years, 50% of the neurologists in Honduras were trained in that program. And you can see here the young faces of different residents and professors that came to Honduras to help us.
The neurology training program is now in effect.
So sorry to interrupt, but do you want to also share the sound of this video?
Yes, please.
That for neurologists in
Hello.
Honduras was a major.
Yes, sound also.
Sound should be there.
Yes.
Okay.
So Professor Medina, can I? Yes.
Sorry?
Yes, sir. We aren't able to hear the audio from the video. Can I request you to please just do a small setting? You can just go to the new share right now where you screen from.
Can you hear?
Not very clearly, sir.
So you are not able to hear Professor Monsat, isn't?
Yes, sir. So we could just do a small setting of sharing the computer sound.
How can we do that?
Yes, sir. If you can see the Zoom menu where you did the share screen from, at the same place you might be able to see now a button of new share. So the Zoom menu. Okay, I will. Yes, sir. So can I request you to please reshare the screen, and once so, just a moment. So before you do the final share, at the same level as the share button on the left hand side, you have the share computer sound tick that we need to use. So you could click on share screen, the green button, and where you have the blue share button at the same level on the left hand side.
Yes, I got it.
Yes, sir.
The training program has now been in effect 10 years. And the background is such that it is increasingly clear the neurology training program has now been in effect 10 years. And the background is such that it is increasingly clear that neurologic diseases are becoming one of the major problems, not only in Honduras, but all over the world. About 25% of all days of disability are due to neurologic disturbances. So when the program began, we convinced the Minister of Health that the need for neurologists in Honduras was a major need, and that this needed to be addressed, and that's why the training program was started 10 years ago, and it has been tremendously effective. Well, the World Federation of Neurology is interested in assisting developing countries in improving their training program if there's one established, or helping them establish a new program, such as was the case with Honduras 10 years ago. But we only act in an advisory and assisting manner. The real impetus, the real determinant of whether a program will be effective or not comes from the neurologists within that country. And it is the combination of providing some consultative assistance and the enthusiasm of Professor Medina, who is head of the project here in Honduras, and the enthusiasm of the neurologists who were here already that helped put together a program that has now doubled the number of neurologists that are practicing in Honduras. The primary purpose, the primary goal is to improve the neurologic health of the citizens of Honduras. And we do this by providing more and better educated neurologic clinicians.
Professor Monsat was also working in Asia, in Africa, and he started working in Ethiopia. And here is Professor Monsat again, in the other corner of the world. He was explaining at that time that he was completing an external review of the neurology department and residence at the Addis Ababa University in Ethiopia. He was also supporting Senegal, working with Dr. Amadou Gallo Diop in Dakar, and as well as working with Gretchen Birbeck and Professor Arlie. He started a process of certifications of programs. For instance, that was the first one in Honduras, and then the second one in Mexico City, in Ethiopia, in Guatemala, in Peru. And that was a fantastic journey, establishing neurology training programs around the world. He was a little bit concerned about the probability of losing neurologists in that country. So the best approach was to support a local neurology training programs for the brain drain. He started working with Gretchen Birbeck in the neurological care where is no neurologist, and he was supporting her in Zambia, in Malawi, and that was a very fantastic work done by Gretchen, supported by Ted. Maybe later on, Gretchen can explain about that experience. As I was mentioned to you, Professor Monsat with Professor Johan Arlie, former WFN president, started the WFN Africa initiative with the support of Professor Gretchen Birbeck, and mainly with Professor Gallo Diop and others. So a WFN continuing education program was started in several countries such as Cameroon, Uganda, Zambia, Nigeria, Ethiopia, and Kenya. We started having WFN Education Committee meetings in London, and they were a fantastic meetings that we were having at that time. I just remember on December 10th, 2004, in Chandos Street, where Professor Monsat was there, Professor Jun Kimura, Arlie, Godwin Austin, Dr. Apostolsky, Carrie Becker, Donna Bergen, Professor Gretchen Birbeck, Professor Boyer, Ala Gecht, myself, Dr. Murray, Donna Schneider. Dr. Schneider was the owner of Demos. Demos was a editorial company in New York, and Schneider was having his own husband having MS, and she was supporting a lot the neurological, education. Dr. Axel Siva, Bilger, Newton, Professor Grisol, Professor Monroe, Srihan, and De Souza, among others. Here you can see a crowded table in Sydney, Australia, where we were discussing how to develop education around the world. That was a fantastic meeting at that time. Professor Monsat was a great researcher, and he published more than 200 scientific articles and books, including textbooks on ALS, the post-polio syndrome, and quantification of neurologic deficit. He was a worldwide leader in ALS research. This is a book that he published in a post-polio syndrome, and he published a lot of papers in different journals. For instance, this editorial at the New England Journal of Medicine, saying that the poliomyelitis was a new problem with an old disease. He was quite concerned about this problem in the United States, but as well as in the rest of the world. And he was estimating that between 250,000 to 300,000 survivors were in the United States, and the vast majority of them were having at risk of the post-polio syndrome. He was working with, as I was mentioned, with Professor Georges Ratrice in Marseille, France, and he was publishing this book, The Advances of Neurology, on the supplementary sensory motor area. He was working also in some syndromes such as myoclonic epilepsies, and he was discussing how to develop research in the supplementary sensory motor area. Professor Monsat was also working with different diseases. For instance, the central nuclear myopathy, that was the 5th case published, initially was described by Dr. Espiro. But, this type of research also shows his methodology. He was explaining us all the time that you can learn in a case-oriented problem methodology. That is the best approach to educate residents or to show a problem. That was a little girl with this central nuclear myopathy, and he was an expert on histology, and you can see here the histological data showing the central nuclear myopathy in this case that he was evaluating and publishing. But his main work was on ALS, and he was involved on measuring clinical deficit by a combination of quantitative strength, force, testing of muscles and functional tests that was codified in the tough quantitative this neurological assessment. He was quite enthusiastic to evaluate this because using this kind of technique, he was thinking to develop at the same time treatments and evaluating treatments with objective measurement techniques. Professor Monsat, he was working with Professor Benjamin Riggs Brooks, having an international workshop in 1990 at El Escorial near Madrid. As you know, El Escorial was the palace for the monarchy in Spain, and at that place, they were producing a consensus agreement on diagnosis, a process that soon assumed epic proportion as various fixed beliefs were taken apart in discussions that continued late into the night over several days. Later on, they published again 6 years after El Escorial revisited, and they were evaluating this diagnostic criteria, and that was allowing to the World Federation of Neurology to establish the research group of motor neurons disease with Ted Monsat as his first chairman. And these activities, this spearhead together with his pivotal 1994 early house workshop on therapeutic trials, and that allows the first treatment, Riluzole, and he was quite enthusiastic about this, as well as on the genetics of the ALS. But his main soul was also in education. We were working together for almost 15 years, writing on CME or education at the international level, and evaluating strategies how to develop educational programs on behalf of the World Federation of Neurology. Professor Monsat had a lot of tributes after he died. Myself, I was involved on several of them, but also the Argentinians were quite impressed of his work, and they were tributing Ted Monsat, as well as his old friend, Benjamin Riggs Brooks, and Michael Swash, and in the Boston Globe also, and at the JAMA Neurology, and at the Neurology by Walton Bradley and Lewis Rowland. They were just showing us different perspective of not just the professional side of Ted, but also his human values. For instance, his colleagues at Tufts were remembering Ted as a great fondness and as a devoted and empathic doctor, colleague, teacher, and friend. Ted was remembered for his devotion to his patients with ALS, people often seen by others as incurable and beyond help. Ted disagreed. He worked to improve their individual life through symptom management, studying, counseling, and research. And that was made by this analysis was made by Lester Adelman and David Thaler at JAMA. It was a great privilege and honor for me to have met and worked with Professor Monsat. He was a gentle, gracious mentor with a warm and sincere personality who loved helping others every chance he had. He sent me, some pictures, and that was a gift for me, a precious gift. that he sent me to myself and the neurologists of Honduras. He inspired me as well as several generations of residents and neurologists all around the world, and he left an outstanding legacy with the WFN as well as with the American Academy of Neurology. Because of that, the American Academy of Neurology and the WFN started the hour to recognize an individual's educational contribution to the WFN. And Ted loved the outdoors, sailing, skiing, and camping with his family. He sailed Lake Champlain and the New England coastal waters and the Caribbean as far afield as Tahiti. Here, we were just discovering the Maya ruins of Copan. And he was really happy to see that, you know. Or for instance, we went to the Tiger Island with Alberto Portera and Catherine, the wife of Alberto. Ted was so happy at that time. And we were crossing the sea to see this island in the Pacific Ocean in Honduras. That was a fantastic journey 20 years ago. He was passionate about his home state of Vermont and how to tap maple trees and make maple syrup and apple ciders. He has his own signature in one of the maple syrup. And in his retirement, he raised sheep, made furniture, and tended his vegetable garden. Through his life, he lived in many parts of the US, and he always considered Vermont his own home and maintained a residence there for many years. A beautiful place, Vermont. Professor Monsat is survived by his wife, Carla Monsat. Carla Monsat is an artist, a fantastic artist. And his daughter, Amy Monsat, his son, Peter Monsat, and 6 grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Marco, thank you so much for that. Just a wonderful and amazing and instructive tribute and biography of Dr. Monsat. I learned so much, and I'm sure we all did, and greatly appreciate your sharing your memories and thoughts about this really tremendous individual. I'm going to pass the baton to Professor Meshram at this point.
Yeah, I think Professor Marco Medina had a wonderful talk. Congratulations, and must be a privilege for you to be associated with Professor Ted Monsat for quite some time. So we have. I would like to also welcome Professor Raj Shakir to this session, Professor Axel Siva, who joined late, and Professor Ala, who she has also joined, and Professor Wolfgang Griswold joined while Professor Marco was giving the talk. And now we would like to listen to some of the panelists. And may I now invite Professor Axel Siva?
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Hello. Thanks for giving me the word. I was just listening to Marco, and I went back to many years ago, and I'm seeing a lot of friends and colleagues who I know very well among the panelists and attendees. So it's a kind of a very nostalgic moment for me at this very time. Ted Monsat was a great friend. He was a great neurologist. He was a great person and I don't need to repeat. Marco beautifully summarized. How I met maybe Ted, I could mention this a bit. It was 2001 and it was the Russian Neurological Congress. Maybe Allah will remember that. And another friend, Alexei Boyko, who had invited me there, and Ted was there. So it was well, I knew Ted Mansett certainly, but personally, I met him there and we had a whole week together. And 3 or 4 days of it was on a cruise on the Volga. And we had the table of 4, what we called Ted, another American friend, and the late great MS person. Oh my God, I'm getting old. A great guy from Canada.
Probably it was Charles Poser, or it was from Canada. No.
It's Roger. I think it was Don Peaty. Don Peaty.
Don Peaty. Yes, Raj. Don Peaty. Don Peaty, I knew him from many years, and Don Peaty, it was another great person. Anyway, so Don, Ted, myself, and another friend, we spent 324 hours all together. And then a couple of, the following year, Ted invited me to join the WFN Education Committee, and and I have been to a number of meetings in the December meetings that Marco and Ala will beautifully remember. So to me, Ted was someone very special. We have been with him at the Cuban neurological meeting in, I think, 2006 it was, and in many other meetings. So when he passed away, it was the loss of a very good friend, a very great neurologist. So maybe these are the few words that I could share with you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Axel Siva.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great that you shared the memories with Professor Ted Monsart. Now, may I invite Professor Betjen Birbeck to say something about Professor Ted Monsart and her.
Thank you. Can you all hear me? So I'm delighted to be included on the panel. And Dr. Medina, that was just a delightful, informative discussion of a truly remarkable life. My own experience with Dr. Mansett, I was just a fellow at UCLA, having spent some time in Zambia and planning on returning to Zambia. And this was 23 years ago. American neurologists were not engaged in global anything. So I was a serious outlier and had ideas, because at that time I was the only person with neurologic expertise spending any time in Zambia. Certainly not the case today, but I wanted to train clinical officers, so not even physicians, to improve care. And when I ran this idea past virtually anybody I knew, friend, colleague, mentor, I sort of got to look like I was losing my mind, and they hoped I'd find it somewhere. And I had awareness of Dr. Mansett's enthusiasm for global neurology and for global training. And I sent him an email. So he gets an email from some fellow he knows nothing about. And he called me and we spoke for 2 hours on the phone about my vision of what I'd hoped we could do for Zambia and for the care in Zambia. And he was a remarkable man. He knew nothing about this place or these people. He wanted to learn. And he really wanted to figure out what he personally and what WFN could do to improve care for this population that had very few options at that time. I have to say he was critical in helping get some early small amounts of funding on the ground. He provided legitimacy to the work I wanted to do, because at that time it really wasn't something anyone took very seriously in the US as far as this being a reasonable academic endeavor. And over the years, at every time that I hit a roadblock or I was really at my wit's end about the next steps, I could call Ted and he would speak to me as long as I needed him to help think things through. And I have to say, being a more senior person now, I can't imagine having that capacity and generosity to be able to just answer the email from somebody who I don't know at all and spend hours helping them figure something out. He was truly remarkable in that way. I was puzzled once when he invited me to come with him to Ethiopia to examine the first class of postgraduate trainees. And being a senior person now and looking back, it was very clear he was trying to plant the seed in my head of look what Zambia could do. And instead of telling me that, he shows me, which I think was just incredibly valuable. He had a passion for what he did and for the people he worked with that I hope all of us will at least enjoy a bit of. When he spoke about the work in Honduras, he just glowed. And when he spoke about you, Dr. Medina, he spoke about you the way most people speak of their children. So he truly mentored in a fashion, in a parental fashion that included this sort of love and non-judgment most of us can only aspire to. Zambia today is truly amazing. When I spoke to him 23 years ago, there were no neurologists. We have our second class of postgraduate Zambian trainees now running the University Teaching Hospital, for which I can take almost no credit at all, but certainly Dr. Munsit was the pebble in the pond that did that. And his willingness to invest endless hours has really resulted in people like Deanna Saylor and Omar Siddiqui being able to take that program and really develop what's becoming a truly academic curriculum with fabulous care resulting. So I can't say enough about him, but I've learned a lot that I didn't know. So thank you all for including me. And thank you for honoring somebody who really has made a global difference.
Professor Gretchen, it was wonderful.
Maybe I could say some words if I have to leave in a few minutes.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
Gallo from there.
Yeah. Yeah, Gallo.
Well,
go on. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt your program, but I'm on a way to travel back to Dakar.
Yeah, please go on, Gallo.
Yes. Thank you for giving me some minutes because I'm traveling back to Dakar. I was out of the capital city. Well, I'm very pleased to share. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. I was saying I'm very pleased to share this time with you for celebrating Ted. I knew him very well with Marco and many people around the virtual means. So I would just emphasize the fact that he was really a great man, very generous. And the point I would like to raise is that with the past president of World Federation of Neurology, John Arley, and Professor Michel Dumas, on whom we're going to talk about in November the 6th. It was very instrumental in setting up what we call the Africa Initiative. And that really made a difference because by pushing up all we are trying to do since years under the leadership of people such as Michel Dumas, it really came with practical and generous ideas and contribution. And we've started to share documents and any other means of education in neurology. And also, we have been more enthusiastic in setting up local training in neurology for young doctors. And I know that that time we are training almost 20 doctors in sub-Saharan Francophone African countries. And I know that also under his leadership, many people such as Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and so on started to look toward better means to improve neurological education. That's what I wanted to share with you for not being too long. I'm very happy that this kind of round table has been organized. I'm congratulating you and all the Indian Neurological Society, the World Federation of Neurology. I see many faces. We are meeting in physical meeting. We really miss this more human and more warm meetings, but time will come that we'll go back to see each other in some cities around the world. Thank you very much. And
thank you.
Congratulations.
Looking forward to your talk on 6th November about Professor Michel Dumas. Thank you so much for being with us. We now have Professor Ala Goops, who is a WFN trustee, and Professor Monsart was her mentor. So, Ala, what do you have to say about your
mentor? Thank you very much, and many thanks for having me at this round-table group, and that's a pleasure and honor. And, I could not agree more with everything that has been said about TED. Indeed, we can also only speak about him in their most, admirable words, and he deserved it entirely. I met Ted in, I think, late 90s, and it was a kind of the eye-opening meeting. He brought me, I'm really very much grateful to him for bringing me in academic international neurology and also in the education in neurology. He had a passion and an outstanding ability to bring now around him good people and to making these people friends. So we started to be, friends with Marco and later with Axel, owing to TED. And for many years, we met at different occasions, and we all were together, three of us and TED. And there were endless discussion about neurology, about whatever, about human being, about education, about life, for hours. And only being, I would say, I can say diplomatic people, we actually stopped these meetings and allowed Ted to, spend evenings with Carla and with somebody else, because, we were eager to speak to him all the day round. And we learned, I think, a lot. Probably even at that time, we were too young to understand how much did we learn from him. Not only, once again, not only in neurology, but in all his vision and in all his biography. And he told us about his life. And from very, very early age, and he discussed, he explained us a lot about the American Academy of Neurology, which he was the chair for a number of years. And for us, it was really eye-opening. And also education system in US, medicine in US, and it made an unbelievable impact on me, and I think on Marco as well. Also, he made an amazing contribution to the development. I think Mark already spoke about that, but I would like to mention that he made an outstanding contribution to the development of education in Eastern Europe. He traveled with us to Moscow, to Yaroslavl, as already acknowledged by Axel, to Armenia, to, well, I can't remember all the countries. And he was with us, and he not only gave talks on ILS and neuromuscular, but also on education. And his impact on development of, I think, appropriate academic feelings in this area was outstanding. I will just try to show, unfortunately, I don't have as many pictures as Marco, and I will try to share my screen. Yes. Can you see it? So just a couple of pictures. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So at the upper slide, it was the, well, I don't remember which number, a Congress of Neurology, and the city of Yaroslavl. I think, Axel, it was the place where you met Ted, or probably it was earlier because we were meeting many times, and I'm happy about that. And we had the first educational roundtable discussion at the time, and we started many continuum groups in Yaroslavl, and probably then it evolved to thousands of young Russian doctors who were using continuum in their work and in their education. And at the bottom, it was Moscow or St. Petersburg. I don't remember. Probably it was St. Petersburg. I'm wrong. And as you can see, it was the meeting on education, and also it was the launch of the Russian edition of Jim Toole, Cerebrovascular Disorders, that Professor Gusev and I translated. And it was dedicated to stroke and to education in neurology. And as you can see, Ted was there. And as you can see, the hall was completely packed. And I would say another things about Ted, he was a brilliant speaker. And wherever he spoke, the hall was packed. Also, a couple of personal recollections. He was kind enough to give me his book on ALS. And once he was in Moscow, and then he met my late father, who was a specialist in neuromuscular. And then we came just spontaneously to Country House, and we spent quite a lot of time there discussing. And I was a young neurologist at that time. So between two giants in neuromuscular disorders and in ALS, I think I learned during this couple of days, well, more than you can learn during months. And it was an outstanding discussion. I was just listening, being afraid to lose one word that they were discussing about further directions and whatever, and mechanism and so on. So I would just stop here. And I think the legacy of TED is evolving as Marco, Axel, all the people around this table, you are bringing the light of TED to further generations. And thank you very much for arranging this discussion. It's really brilliant. And also I would like to echo what Marco said about Carla and the family. It was a very warm family, an outstanding family. And I met Carla and Ami many times, and it always was very informal. It was always very friendly. And, you felt like a member of this family in 5 minutes. So once again, many thanks, and I'm happy that I met Ted at some point in my life. And thank you again for making this meeting possible. Thank you again.
Thank you, Professor Ala. Professor Bill Carroll could not join this meeting because he had other meetings, but he just mentioned that he had a great association with him, and his publication with James Barnes was part of the inspiration from one of his first neurological papers, ophthalmoplegia in post-infective polyneuropathy from 1997. And Professor Bill Carroll was also able to convince the American Academy of Neurology, when Professor Ralph Sacco was president, to co-fund the WFN Munsard Award for Neurological Education. And the first award was given to Professor Tisa Vijayaratne, who is with us today. The second award was given to Professor Sarosh Katrak, who is also with us. And this year, the award will go to Professor Eric Smuchard, and it will be given during the WCN at the Rome meeting. And may I now invite Professor Tisa to say something?
Professor Mishram and rest of the other distinguished the faculty in this meeting. Thank you so much for having me on this board. I would like to drive all of your attention to the short video clip that Marco Marco posted, and how great late Ted Bunsat mentioned that the job of WFN is to enthuse the individual countries' neurologists and give the idea in advisory capacity, and the success of that sort of a program ultimately depend on people like Marco, who actually carry this flag. The reason that I quote this is when I was awarded with this, I remember when I was in Kyoto, I tapped Professor Shakir's the back and said that normally WFN give awards when we are about to be diagnosed as demented or when we are about to die, and I hope that I'm nowhere near to any one of these things, and I didn't think that I was suitable for this award, which I shared with my good friend Walter. And then Professor Shakir said that no, you were richly deserved to this, and we were watching the contributions that you were making. I'm not mentioning this as a sort of boasting way. At the same way, actually, I became life-threateningly unwell. And I didn't die, of course. And many of my close friends told me that you left rural Sri Lanka and you established yourself in Melbourne. And while you made a name, you could have made a lot of money, which you decided to not do. And they were encouraging me, now that I survived, to change my tactics, which I didn't. I think the education is such a powerful tool. I was actually born in rural Sri Lanka, and it is because of the education that I had, I was able to do whatever the little things that I could do. Education is really the solution for poverty and ignorance that is driving chaos and craziness to this world globally, including this pandemic. I think Ted's legacy and the amazing stories that we heard from Marco, Allah, and Akshay today is the epitome to remind us that we should carry on this legacy in multiple strength to make sure that we address poverty and the ignorance with one voice, promoting better brain health. I think it is an amazing experience to listen to this great man, and it is probably the unmatched honor for me to be associated with the first award at that time, which I still believe not deserved. You can still take it back, Professor Shakir, even today. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Professor Tisa. Now, may I invite Professor Marian Visser? She was associated with, TED in the motor neuron disease research project. Professor Marian.
Thank you, Dr. Meshram. It's really an honor to be part of this panel. At first, I would like to thank Professor Marco Medina for a really magnificent and moving tribute to Dr. Ted Munsett. I would like to briefly share my memories of the encounters with Dr. Munsett, and inevitably there is some overlap with the presentation of Dr. Munsett. I should like to share my screen. Ted Munsett was a generalist, but his research area of interest was neuromuscular disorders, as we also learned from Marco Medina. He started publishing in 1962 with a paper in which he reported 3 cases of amyloid polyneuropathy, and his last publication dates back to 2013, 1 year before his demise. He was clearly an all-round neuromuscular expert with publications on postpolio syndrome. You've seen this slide before with the book on postpolio syndrome, but he also published on myasthenia gravis, myopathies, hereditary and acquired, including inflammatory myopathies. However, over the years, he focused on 2 diseases, ALS, as Marco already mentioned, and spinal muscular atrophy. Dr. Munsett was heavily involved in the gene hunt on spinal muscular atrophy. He was the first or last author or co-authored numerous papers on SMA in journals with a high impact factor such as Neurology and even Nature. And I met him for the first time in 1991 during a workshop of an international consortium on SMA, which was organized by Ted and by Kay Davies, a world-renowned scientist from Oxford. And the purpose of these workshops was to establish clear diagnostic criteria, which was driven by the recent mapping of the SMA gene to chromosome 5q, and the likelihood that the SMA gene itself would be defined in the near future. That stressed that since the molecular genetic studies were being conducted as an international collaboration, the need for consistency of phenotypic definition was felt to be even more urgent. This picture was taken at the 7th meeting of the consortium in 1995 in Naarden, the Netherlands, under the auspices of the European Neuromuscular Center. Professor Alan Emery, an eminent British geneticist, represented ENMC. Ted Munsett and Kay Davies chaired the meeting. There had been a recent publication of extremely promising candidate genes by Judith Melke from the group. You can see her here. So it was important to further work on the overall goal of finding the gene and gene product and identifying effective therapeutic agents. It was customary to make a picture of all workshop members, but surprisingly, neither Ted Munsett nor Victor Dubuich, who was world famous for his clinical work on SMA, are present on this picture. I really don't know why they went in hiding when the picture was taken. There are others who might be familiar to you, like Professors Kay Davies, by the face of Professor Hausmanova, Petrusevic, Alan Emery, as I already mentioned, Klaus Tseres, and Arthur Burgess, who worked closely with Jerry Mendell, who was the first to introduce gene therapy for this devastating disease. The picture shows very young faces from people in the prime of their life, but then again, the picture was taken 25 years ago. I also met Ted a couple of times in his capacity as chair of the educational committee of the World Federation of Neurology, as we heard in the presentation by Professor Marco Medina. The president at that time, Johan Arley, was a driving force behind the Africa initiative, together with Gallo Diop from Senegal. And this picture shows the key players participating in this extremely important initiative. And you might also recognize familiar faces amongst the participants. I was honored to be part of this as an elected World Federation trustee at that time. On the right, pictures of Ted visiting Ethiopia, one of the first projects of the Africa Task Force. And of course, there was already a fantastic example set by Dr. Gretchen Bierbeck in Zambia, who established, as we heard, a training program for paramedical professionals. And I would like to specifically mention Professor Chopra, who has been the editor-in-chief of World Neurology for a long time, and World Neurology always published mementos of important WFN meetings. This is also a nice picture of Ted with a glass of wine in his hand to celebrate WFN's Golden Jubilee, and we also recognize Ala Gwecht amongst those who joined the party. And the last slide, you've seen it in Marco's presentation, shows a picture of Ted visiting Argentina. And I would like to quote the author of the tribute from the Neurological Society of Argentina, which has been published in World Neurology in 2014. Ted Munset worked with the WFN to improve neurology and education in many developing countries, including educational programs in Honduras with Professor Medina and Argentina. The educational program began in 2003 and benefited over a decade of continuity to hundreds of neurologists in our country with a significant educational imprint. I want to highlight his passion for education, intelligence, humor, kindness with a great ability to make easier the harder things. A natural leader, a gentleman, an honorable man. He had a warm and sincere personality. I can only echo those words. I'm extremely grateful that I've been able to collaborate with Ted and learn from him. He was indeed truly inspiring and one of the kindest people I ever met. Thank you, Dr. Mestrom.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Marian. I think it was a great tribute. Now we move on to Professor Sarosh Katrak, the second Ted Munset awardee by WFN. Professor Sarosh Katrak.
Sarosh, you have to unmute.
Sir, please unmute. We can't hear you. Yeah.
I'd like to share a couple of slides which are really of historical interest. I was familiar with Ted's work on ALS and particularly on the post-polio syndrome. But I first learned about his educational commitments when I saw one of the first issues of Continuum in 1993. I'd like to share these. Now, at that stage, in the beginning stage, Continuum was published 6 issues in a year, but they were just numbered A to F. And this is the journal. I still have a copy of this issue, which was called E, the Neurologist and Infectious Diseases. You see here that it is called Part A. And it was called Part A because they had the CME question, they had the multiple choice questions, but they didn't have the answers. And the answers came in Part B. And on the first cover, it was put up a program of the American Academy of Neurology, where Theodore L. Munset was the program director, and Elliot Mencol was the General Editor. I'll stop sharing my slides. However, it was 11 years later in 2004 that I first got in touch with him. At that stage, I was the president of the Indian Academy of Neurology and was very upset to read a report by TED in World Neurology, September 2004, that the WFN CME Continuum program had a very weak presence in Asia, particularly in India. His commitment to this program was so much that he contacted Dr. N.H. Wadia about the poor presence of this program in India. Dr. Wadia informed him to get in touch with me as I was the president. And then we started exchanging emails. When I expressed my concerns about from our side, he sent back an email that, Sarosh, why don't you take over as coordinator? And this stimulated me to take over the reins as coordinator of the program in India. Initially, he advised me, he guided me, and after about 6 months, we had the first CME held on 17th of July 2005. There were 25 postgraduate students who attended that session and found it to be unique and useful. And that was the start of my journey in the WFN CME program. Secondly, as the program went on, I expressed that we did not have funds for postage. We had to post the journals to the various centers in India. And secondly, we had to post the evaluation forms back to the head office in London. When I expressed these things to TED and Monica Bruff, who was then the WFN education coordinator, they immediately got to work and through their good offices managed to get a generous educational grant for us from the Australian Association of Neurologists in August 2005 and again in July 2006. And then the program was on an even keel and moved smoothly in India. He was so happy with our efforts that he invited me to attend the Educational Committee meeting at the 18th WCN in Sydney, Australia on 6th of November and share my experiences with other members. And between 2005 and 2009, we remained in touch with each other. He constantly encouraged me to continue with this work. He stepped down as the chair of the Education Committee in April 2009. And in his email, when he informed us, he encouraged all the coordinators to continue with their good work. I wrote to him at that stage, and I quote verbatim, "Sad as it may be, we must respect your decision and move forward on the path that you have put us on." Promptly, he replied the very next day, thanking me for my sentiments, and then he added a few lines which were complimentary as well as inspirational for me to carry on with my work as coordinator. He wrote, "I often refer to your work in India as the best example of how our program should work. As you know, there comes a time when it is appropriate to move on to further challenges. And now is the time for me." The WFN has honored him by creating the Ted Munsat Award for Neurology Education in 2017. As Chandrasekhar Mishram has mentioned, I was the second recipient in 2019. And at the ceremony, I gratefully acknowledged his help, guidance, and encouragement during the initial stages of my tenure as a CME convener for India. He was truly an inspirational leader in the field of neurology education, besides all his academic activities. Thank you, Jamresh.
Thank you, Professor Sarosh Katra. Would Professor Raj Shakir or UG Kazi would like to say a few words?
Do you want me to start or Ryuji? I don't mind.
Please, Rad.
Thank you.
You go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I've known Ted since the first year I became Secretary Treasurer General after the Sydney meeting. That's 2006. And he ran the Education Committee, and we had several discussions, let me call them, about funding. He was very keen on funding education everywhere in the world, and we talked about convening the Education Committee yearly, because remember at that time the World Congress was once every 4 years. So we had to say, how do we fund gathering so many people from across the world for a day meeting, which was not easy. And more importantly, to keep the continuum going and to keep the relationship with the American Academy, who was giving us continuum for cost price, let's call it. But we, the WFN, were responsible for disseminating continuum across the world. And we did that for years, and we had discussions, and when he came to London, and we then, when he passed away, I have to say, nobody, I don't know if it was mentioned because I had to go in and out, but there was in his will an amount of funds to the WFN, part of his will. I don't know, was this mentioned before? And if you don't know, this is the basis of the Todd Mansat award. So this amount of funds, which we needed to supplement, and we did supplement this amount of funds, was the reason why we have the Todd Mansat award. So the great man, even following his passing away, he left a legacy for the award that Tessa received and Struhal received and Sarosh, and it continues. So his impact is huge, and we were most grateful. And after he passed away by about a year, his daughter, I think it was Amy, is her name Amy? Yes. Amy came over to London on a visit with her 2 children, and she visited the WFN. She wanted to visit because she heard so much about it from her father. And then we discussed how should we direct this award? What kind of person would her father want to be awarded such an award? And this is why the individuals who contributed to education were chosen. Maybe Tessa, I don't know if you knew that, but that's what happened. And maybe Sarosh, I don't know if you knew that, but that's what happened. So I know him well, I've dealt with him well, not on a clinical or working or scientific relationship, but relationship of the, at that time, Secretary Treasurer General of the WFN and the chair of the Education Committee. And the relationship was professional, courteous, it was empathetic, and we had a lot of time for each other and a lot of social interaction as well. So I have to say, on behalf of myself, the WFN, we are still grateful for Ted and his family for the legacy they left us, which was the nucleus, the origin of the Mansat Award. And I think that has to be said now and written up. It's in our archives as well. So thank you for asking me to make such a comment, but I thought that has to be mentioned as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Rad. Professor UG Kazi.
Well, thank you. When I became the trustee of WFN in 2007, I met him on the train. We had to go somewhere. I can't remember right now, but for educational meeting from someplace in Europe, and we shared this seat with him, spending 3 hours with conversation. And as many people on the panel and Malcolm said, he is a man of passion, and he loves caring for the patient. And that conversation started with my hobby, that is sailing, and he was very fond of sailing at the time. And then for the first time I met him, but it wasn't something like the first time. And then we got into some works on him on ALS, because I knew him a lot from his works on ALS. And I've just retired from executive board from IFCN at that time in 2006. And I managed to have a consensus meeting for electrophysiological diagnostic criteria for clinical trials that is known as Awaji criteria right now. And I discussed with him, and he encouraged us to make it more usable. And then right now it has been accepted for the past 10 years or so. And I think Awaji criteria for clinical diagnosis, that is unfortunately a product of IFCN, not WFN right now, is a kind of brainchild of Ted. And I think his passion is to educate everybody in the world and to care for the patient. And I do think from the conversations and the lectures from today, I learned that his personality embodies the spirit of WFN. I'm convinced. Thank you very much for just allowing to make some comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yuji Kazi. I think we had a wonderful session and wonderful tribute about a person, a neurologist who is involved so much in not only education, he was mentor to so many putting up new ideas about education. And he had other interests. He was a sailor. He would enjoy vacations, and he would, as Marco said, that tap the maple trees to create his own brand of maple syrup. And he had made the furniture for his home at Vermont. That is a kind of bit, for a neurologist to make the furniture for his home. So we rarely see such brand of neurologists these days. And it was really interesting. And he would say to his wife that every day is a new day and it comes with a new adventure. So I think we had a great session. And for that participating session, I would like to thank Professor Marco Medina for a wonderful talk. And it was, I think, Marco who came forward and suggested that we should have the session on Ted Mansart. And therefore, we started moving very fast on that. And would like to thank Steve Lewis for chairing this very important session. And would like to thank Professor Raj Shakir and Professor Yuji Kazi, and the panelist, Professor Gretchen Bidbeck, Professor Marianne Visser, Professor Ala Gupt, Professor Sarosh Khatrak, Tisa Vijayaratne, and Professor Axel Siva, and Amado Gallo, Perry Mary Brooks, and Professor Griswold was with us for some time during the talk. Would like to thank everyone, and would like to remind that we meet again on 6th of November, same time, to know about Professor Michel Dumas. And we will have Michel Dumas speaking in that session, and Professor Perry Mary Brooks and Professor Amado Gallo would also be there with us. So would like to thank everyone and thank all the participants, and thank Gagandeep for being with us. And I think we had a wonderful session, and we meet again for another great session. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mansi.
Thank you, sir.